Welcome back, it's me, Lou. Okay, so I am very conflicted. A few months ago, I came across this action figure. It's Earth's Mightiest Heroes, Avengers. It's Heroes Reborn Iron Man with Power Converter. I found this at my local half-price books for $15.99. I kind of bought this blindly, just because when I saw this figure at on the shelf at the store, I'm like, I need this action figure. Mostly because I'm a big fan of this design of Iron Man. Hasbro made their own interpretation of this character, I think back in 2008, under the Marvel Legends line. But that kind of featured the much more antiquated articulation scheme that was kind of more reminiscent of like an older Toybiz figure. But I think this was the first action figure that depicted Heroes Reborn Iron Man. Now, if you don't know who Heroes Reborn Iron Man is, here's the cover to issue number 1, which was published back in 1996. It was written by Scott Lobdell and Jim Lee. It was illustrated by Will Portacio and inked by Scott Williams and JD. So in the mid-90s, more specifically in 96, Marvel had this kind of event called Heroes Reborn. It was such a long time ago, I don't remember what the deal was entirely, but during the 90s, there were a lot of Marvel superheroes like the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man. They didn't have the kind of like momentum that the X-Men had. During the early 90s, the X-Men were like huge. They had like the comic book, issue 1, I think sold over 1 million copies. They had the cartoon series on Fox. And Marvel had such a good thing going with X-Men. Other comic books like Fantastic Four and Avengers and the Hulk, Iron Man, Captain America, even though they were kind of like the flagship characters for Marvel for such a long time, they just weren't pulling in the same numbers in terms of the comic books as the X-Men were. So what happened was they did this event called Heroes Reborn, and it was kind of like a weird reboot. Some of the main characters like the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Captain America, and the Avengers, I don't remember if they were written off out of the standard Marvel universe or whatever it was, but they kind of reintroduced them, and it's hard for me to explain. It was almost like it's like a multiverse kind of deal. But anyways, a lot of the characters saw updated designs. They kind of changed their origin story slightly. They kind of wanted to reinvigorate, those franchises and bring them up to modern standards. Iron Man was one of them, and they kind of gave him this new costume. It was a lot flashier. It looked a lot more sleek. It was more in line with like how comic book fans envisioned, their superheroes. So they kind of pulled in artists from like Image, Wildstorm, and they kind of like reimagined these characters. And the result for Iron Man was this. This was the Will Portacio illustrated Iron Man, and that's what this figure is based off of. So right now I'm just conflicted because when I first bought this figure, I had all intentions of opening them, but I've kind of amassed over the last year a small collection of mint on card Toybiz Marvel superheroes. Even though this figure isn't very expensive on the secondary market, I think it actually goes for like $15 on eBay. I'm just in love with the package design, and I kind of know that if I took it out, I'd regret it later just because I don't have anywhere to display it, let alone other similar Toybiz figures to display it with. So for now, I think this is just going to be a mint on card review. We're just going to talk about this briefly and just like put the spotlight on it. So for one, this is a very large card. I'm guessing this card back's probably like maybe 11 inches. As you can see here, I think this is an original Toys R Us price tag. I think this is Toys R Us. It's either Toys R Us or Walmart. So originally the figure retailed for $4.97. Then at some point in time, it looks like it was clearanced for $1.90, even though they said the original price was $7. but on the one side it said it was $4.97. And then eventually down the road, whoever had this at one point in time sold it to my local half-priced books back in August of 2022. And then half-price books kind of charged the collector price for it, which is roughly 15 bucks. The figure is about 6 inches tall. It comes with this giant accessory, which is his power converter. So the way this works is you stand this down, like maybe on your table, and then this end here, this long hose, there's kind of like an attachment, and that plugs into Iron Man's chest right there. And then there's 4 additional hoses. Each one has its own plug. And then on Iron Man, there's receptacles on his fists and on his kneecaps. So this is almost kind of like a charging station. You know, he charges up and regains power through this main hose here. And then you simply attach these additional hoses onto the body of the figure. The figure is nicely colored. There's some metallic looking reds for like the exhaust in the back. Metallic gold. Let's get back in focus again. Yeah, there we go. There's some metallic gold on his faceplate, on his shoulders, legs, and biceps. So it's a nice looking figure. There's some contrast with the matte finish against the more metallic pieces, but I think this adds more life to the character. On the back, wonderful airbrushed looking illustration. Airbrush was all the rage in the 80s and 90s, but I think this might have been illustrated in Photoshop possibly. And then they talk about the origin of Heroes Reborn Iron Man. It's kind of similar to like what we know as like normal Iron Man. You know, he was kind of dying and he kind of needed a way to survive, so he, you know, made this costume. Some other figures in the line, there was Scarlet Witch, Loki, Mighty Thor, and Heroes Reborn Iron Man. So what was nice with this figure is that you kind of had the stamp here, Marvel Collector Edition. Not all the figures had that. Generally, some of the action figures that Toybiz put out that were aimed more so at collectors, they were usually larger than their standard figures. Toybiz, they had multiple lines of action figures going on at once. Some of the more basic action figures were generally about maybe 4.5 to 5 inches tall, whereas the stuff that they were aiming at collectors, they were slightly larger, they're more detailed, and I think it was more so reactionary to like what McFarlane Toys was producing at the time. McFarlane had the larger figures, the much more detailed sculpts, the much more detailed paint jobs. And with Toybiz, you know, they were kind of trying to incorporate that into their own figures. Like if you see here, there's a nice wash applied onto the gold metallics to really accent the detailing and like in the legs and the shoulders and the other musculature. So this is actually one of my favorite Iron Man costumes. I think it's really unique. It's really different. And what's amazing is that this figure came out in 1997, whereas you know they introduced this version of the figure they reintroduced Iron Man in this costume in 1996. So you know it took a year for them just to like you know come out with this figure based off of this comic book. Which back then, that was a really fast turnaround. Nowadays, McFarlane is actually pretty good at that. You know, with some characters, for example, like Ghostmaker. You know, the amount of time that from when the figure debuted to when there was an action figure of him was maybe about a year and a half, I'm guessing. But the turnaround's a lot faster nowadays. But for back then, that was just kind of amazing to like introduce a character, then within a year, you know, here's the toy. All right, so I don't want to leave you feeling too gypped. So we're going to take a look at another Iron Man figure real quick. This is one that I've featured before. This is actually also one of my favorite Iron Man armors. This is the Diamond / Marvel Select Ultimate Iron Man, based off of the Marvel comic books, the Ultimates, which is pretty much the modern re-envisioning of the Avengers, what I kind of think the modern Avengers from the MCU is based off of. This design, I believe, was originally designed by artist Brian Hitch. And this figure is pretty cool because it kind of reminds me of this one here, because like how this one has the power converter that you attach to this guy. This one came with like this giant maintenance station. So this came with a figure. It's a crazy accessory. It's almost like a playset within itself. It's pretty much a display stand. You put it here, and there's all these individual hoses. And the way you display this is that you just kind of pretend Iron Man is just chilling in here, and then you plug all the hoses into his different parts of his armor, so it looks like he's just kind of like charging up, or he's undergoing maintenance. So it's kind of cool that, you know, this figure is kind of similar along, you know, the same lines. This one came out much later. I'm thinking maybe 2000, if I had to guess, maybe 2003, 2005. But it's a beautiful figure. The articulation isn't the greatest. It's not as articulated as the Marvel Legends, but the detailing is nice. Has a couple of removable armor plates like that. So you can see Tony Stark's bare arm and some of his inputs so he can interface with his armor. And I love this figure to death. This is such an awesome figure. Hasbro, I believe, did their own version of this figure some years ago. It's not as large as this one, and it's not as accurate to the comic book, but it's still a pretty decent attempt. So yeah, I just wanted to share this figure with you. I didn't want you to feel gypped that I didn't open this one up. So at the very least, I thought I could at least, you know, show you another Iron Man figure. And it's just cool. I love Iron Man figures that incorporate other accessories beyond his costume. Like there's all the cool Lego sets where they kind of have like the Hall of Armors, and I just dig that kind of stuff. And I think the Disney Toy Box series, which is exclusive to the Disney stores, kind of had that giant Hall of Armors playset, which I thought looked pretty badass. Alright, so let's wrap this one up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning viewer or subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So, until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I'll see you at the next one. Alright, later.